good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, wherever you are sitting around the world. And welcome again, hopefully, to the Ask Me Anything Oracle Database Office Hour. For the next hour, Maria kindly agreed to answer any question Oracle Database related. I'm really just the moderator, so just quick intro before we get started. So Maria, our SQL Maria, I'll let you introduce yourself quickly, Maria.
Oh, sure. My name is Maria Colgan, and I am one of the product managers for the Oracle database. You can find me on sqlmaria.com for my blog or at sqlmaria on Twitter.
Perfect. And myself, I'm Gerald Venzl. I'm a senior product manager for Oracle Database here as well. You can find me mostly on Twitter at Gerald Venzl, or also on my blog or on my LinkedIn if you wish to connect there as well with me. And that's really just already everything we have on intro. So let's jump right into questions. Just to remind everybody, as always, we appreciate, or we are open for questions asked just live if you feel like doing so, or typing questions in the chat if you like doing so. Otherwise, I believe all lines are muted, and so if you would like to want to ask questions, you will have to unmute yourself first before you do so, or you just type it in the chat. As always, we also have a couple of pre-recorded sessions, or sessions that people have already submitted the last couple of days coming up to the office hour, and I believe Maria has already one question searched for us to kick this off. Or there's already a question on the chat, depending.
All right. So do you want me to start? So why don't we start with the one? So folks, if you're not familiar with this, with all of the office hours, you do have the ability to submit a question online before the session. That way you can give Gerald and I a little time to prepare perhaps. And this first one, Gerald, is to you. And it's basically a question that also appeared on Twitter this week. It's all about how will 18C be priced and packaged on-premise? Will we still have standard edition, enterprise edition, all of that good stuff when 18C becomes available on-premise?
Yeah, the answer is yes. So nothing has changed in the pricing. So you will have standard edition 2, you will have enterprise edition with all the options and so forth. So just the same as you had in 12.2. I'm also not aware of any new options coming out. So it will be pretty much the very same as you had with 12.2 with 18C as well.
Okay, any sneaky indication on when that might be, when we might see it on premise? I know sure. The official answer, by the way, before we get ourselves into too much trouble.
What's the official answer?
Second half of calendar year 2018.
Right. Yeah, so no, we're actually quite close now. We are going through our last tests and everything, and plan is right now mid-July. So hopefully we should have 18C on-premise mid-July. As always, caveat this, if we see good reasons to postpone because we find some last-minute issue or something that we think we should really fix, then the date may slip, but everything looks very confident for mid-July to have 18C. And actually, just segue right into the question that we got on the chat there as well from Dennis, because he is asking, when are we getting 18C XE? Well, the good news is I already have it. So for the folks who follow me on Twitter, we got the drop just built last week, and the release for 18C XE is planned to be 1 month after the EE SE2 on-premise release. So with mid-July, that means we are aiming for mid-August to have that available, and it will be available for Linux and Windows both at the same time. So we'll just release it all at once, and I basically have to have the opportunity or duty, depending how you want to see it, to test XE before we release it to make sure that everything's rock solid for you out there.
Great. So basically, by the end of the summer, you should have XE, which is the free developer version for those who may be joining us for the first time, even though every time we get together, Gerald, somehow XE manages to get in the conversation.
Yes. We should have a list of words we are not allowed to talk about anymore.
It could be a drinking game, actually, if you're watching these, that, every time we say XE, you have to take a drink. Thank you for playing. So, yeah, XE, SE2 or EE, the full enterprise edition version of the 18C database, they should all be available on-premise, let's say by the end of the summer or early fall.
after you come back from holiday. Or as some people already told
Exactly.
me, it's only summer in the Northern Hemisphere, right? So August, for those of you in the Southern Hemisphere where it's winter right now.
You may not wish to go on your, oh, it looks like you got a follow-up question, Gerald, on the whole XE.
Yeah, so the question is, and the follow-up question on 18cXE on the slide where there was lineation to 1 instance per server. Is this a license limitation or technical stuff? Mostly the question is, will it be able to have as many instances per server as I want, let's say Docker containers? So, oh yeah, there was limitation. I thought so, the lineation was. So the 1 instance per server is essentially technical limitation, as in to the Oracle SID is set to XE, so therefore you cannot have one X or multiple XEs on the same environment. I know that it was written into the license with 11G that led to a lot of confusion, I believe, because people thought, you know, what's a host, what's an instance, etc., how much can I run? But a long story short, with XE, we strive to the product is the database is constraining itself to the limits that we're giving it. So actually, with the new license, we hopefully remove all of this as well from the license. You know, like CPU count and storage and stuff, because the database does it anyway. And this limitation of 1 instance per server, per host, per environment, if you like, is also a technical given, basically because Oracle SID is hard coded to XE, so therefore on the same physical environment or virtual environment, you cannot have 2 XE instances running, which comes to the conclusion that Dennis was asking, will it be able to run in multiple Docker containers and so forth? Yes, yeah, you can. So that limitation, there is no such restriction from the license. Same if you want to spin it up in Docker containers on the Oracle Cloud or so forth, same thing there. So don't worry about that, and hopefully we will actually not even have this word in the licensing. Dennis just said we made his day. That's great to hear. Given that my day just started, I like that. We start the day off very positively.
I was going to say, that's it. Our job is done. We should stop the call now. I don't think we can go on from here. That we've made Dennis's day. We're done. But oh.
Okay, his day is done. He says it's 10 o'clock in the evening for him. Fair enough. Okay, so Maria, I got a question for you. And that's I think that's a fun question. So one of the questions submitted is basically a SQL question. And you know, there's, for everybody out there, there's a good reason why Maria's Twitter handle is SQL Maria. And not yet Autonomous Maria, for those of you who have been on the call last week and last month when we were joking about that. And the question is, when you have a select statement that says select star from AMP, where depno in bracket, select depno from dep, where dname equals sales and job equals clerk, why does the above query work? And I think what the question is referring to, job is actually a column in EMP and not in dep. So therefore, why can you reference the column in the subquery?
Fair enough. Yes. So I'm guessing the caller, I was going to say, but the question asker is really interested in this notion of a correlated subquery. And let me go ahead and just share my screen so that hopefully you guys can now see my SQL developer environment. And I think I've managed to transcribe the question you just asked me, Gerald, right? So select star from EMP, where the department number on the employees table is in a subquery, which is a select department number from dept, where the dname is equal to sales, but the job column from the employees table is equal to clerk. And the question is, how can I have the jobs column from the employees table in this subquery? And that's no problem with SQL. It's completely allowed. It's actually referred to as a correlated subquery. And the reason we say it's correlated is that it contains one or more columns from the table in the outer query. And that's where the correlation comes between these two things. And really, when you've got a correlated subquery like this, typically or traditionally what happens is for each row returned in the outer query, we must execute that inner query. Now, if we look at the execution plan for this, I can completely geek out on this, Gerald. So at some point, if you start to snooze, it might be time to tell me to stop. But if we, whoops, hold on until I add a connection to my SQL sheet so that we can actually run the execution plan for this. But if I run the execution plan for this and we take a look at it, Oracle is doing a bunch of smart things to execute this query very efficiently. So if we look at the explain plan, now I'm hoping that's not too tiny.
It is quite tiny, but
it is quite tiny, and I have
make the window a bit bigger.
I don't think, I'm fearful that I can't actually increase the font. And this is the problem with me working in front of a giant screen every day, that it looks great for me, but I'm sure tiny for you guys as it's form factored in. But basically, so I won't spend too much time on this, but basically what Oracle has decided to do is a sort, merge, join in order to be able to execute this query. And the reason it's picked a sort, merge, join is that this department, we're able to basically use the primary key to drive into the department table. And the primary key on the department table is the department number. So the entries out of the department table are all going to be in an ordered form or a sorted form, sorted on the join key. And that's why Oracle has picked a sort, merge, join. Because with a sort, merge, join, what we'll do is we'll sort both inputs into that join on the join key and simply merge the two lists together. And so we're able to effectively rewrite this query as a join and do it as a sort, merge, join.
Can you perhaps just quickly for us walk us through the execution plan and maybe highlight each row that makes it a bit easier for people to follow? Or
Okay.
I don't know whether you can click on it or you can just hover over it. Yeah.
So if I toggle over, what you'll see there is the join type has been selected as a merge join. We step down, we're going to access the departments table, and we're actually going to do that based on the primary key. Because remember, we're going to execute that inner subquery for each row from the outer query. And the way into that subquery, is of course on department number. And department number is the primary key of the department table. So we'll go ahead and we'll go in via the index, giving us the results back in a sorted order. And then we're going to access the employees table in full because we've got, at the moment on the outer query, no where clause predicate on the employees table. So it's a full table scan. There was no obvious index that would allow us to go in there. So it's a full table scan for that. So what's going to happen is we'll scan the employees table. We'll apply the filter. So we are smart enough to see the filter inside in the subquery and apply it here. So you'll see there that we did actually apply the job equals clerk filter as part of that full table scan. We'll sort the output because you see there we're trying to prepare for the access predicate E department number equals D department number. So we're sorting on department number to make that sort, merge, join efficient by having both inputs sorted on the join column. Sorry, I'm losing my words today. If we go ahead and so I can pin that plan so that we keep it there in the window. I can go ahead and execute this query and I get a single row back that James is our clerk. So no bother there. You could have done the exact same thing with the following query, and we would have gotten the exact same execution plan. This time I put the predicate on E outside of the, basically making it a standard subquery. Now it's not really a correlated subquery because I've pulled the column from E back out of it. If I go ahead and execute that statement, you'll see that I end up getting the same result. If I get the execution plan for that SQL statement and then use a little trick that Jeff Smith so kindly taught me about being able to compare two execution plans in SQL Developer, which I love this. And it's not just execution plans you can do this with. You can do it with SQL traces as well. If you've enabled auto trace in SQL Developer, you can do this too. But you'll see there that the execution plans turned out to be absolutely identical in how it was executed. That just happens to be the case because we've got a couple of things working in our favor here, that the optimizer is able to transform the query and simplify it. It's not always the case with correlated subqueries, but that's one of the beauties of the Oracle Optimizer. It is a complicated yet magnificent piece of software that is always trying to transform people's queries, find the most optimal execution plan for it. And in this case, as I said, instead of having to rerun the query multiple times, we're able to do it as a sort, merge, join.
Great. Thank you
All
very
right. I think
much.
I probably geeked out enough on you, Gerald.
I have one more question actually for you, if
Uh-oh.
you don't mind, if the audience is still awake. No, I'm sure everybody's highly interested in. So um, my question would be, what would happen in the above query if the department would have a job number as well? And you have here e.job, and what would happen if there wouldn't be an e dot table identifier? So can you just quickly tell us
So
how this will be different? In other words, do I have to worry about how I construct the query? Will it always work? What's the ups and downs of doing it?
yeah, so when you're writing correlated subqueries, it is a very good idea to use the table aliases to truly tell the optimizer the jobs column I'm referring to here is really the employee's job column. Because as you said, if there happened to be a jobs column in the department table, seems a bit weird, but if there were, and I had not put the table alias E there in that, and I just called it job, we would have assumed it was from the department's table, and it would not have been a correlated subquery. It would have just been your standard subquery.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
No worries at all. And it looks like we might have gotten a follow-up question. I don't know whether it's to that or...
It's a follow-up SQL question. So you want me to read it out for
Yeah.
you and give it to you because, as I said, SQL Maria, we got her on the line. There's a great series of articles by Tom Kite in Oracle Magazine on querying top N queries and pagination using row num and analytical functions such as row underscore number, rank, and dense rank. They are old, from 2007, I believe, but still actual. The thing is, the approaches described there are efficient but look really ugly, especially row num based pagination with 2 level of inline views.
Mm-hmm.
So any chances just to have the same stuff wrapped by some a bit more sweet syntax like select, limit, x, y, or something like this?
So funnily enough, in 12.2, we did get some nicer syntax all around doing these kind of top results or top end queries in 12.2. So we now have oh my goodness me, my words are not working today. Fetch first 10 rows, fetch next 10. All of those kind of pagination queries can be done more efficiently using that new syntax. The implementation under the covers is a little bit different from when you do it with all the row nums. So you are now using the window functions under the covers when you use that new syntax, which is not always the case when you're doing the row num queries where you've got the 2 levels of inline views. So that can change the execution plan and the access paths that are open to us. So just bear that in mind, but it certainly looks a lot prettier and a lot cleaner, especially if you're sharing your code with others coming behind you who are trying to figure out what those queries do. So yeah, fetch first X or N rows and fetch next rows, all that syntax is available.
And I think I just add to that actually this fetch first, fetch all, fetch next, all of those new keywords that we got is actually part of the SQL standard. So that all came into the SQL standard 2016, and Oracle implemented that, and you will most likely see this, if not already, in other databases as well. So that will finally give us a nice standardized way of doing paginations in SQL.
Now, Dennis does have a follow-up question, Gerald, and since you're already talking, let me offer it to you. What version did all of this lovely new syntax come in?
Well, you said 12.2, but I actually believe it came in 12.1 already.
Even better. Okay, yeah, you're probably
I'm
right.
not sure either. I'm trying to remember, but
I know for sure it's in 12.2.
Yes, it's certainly in 12.2.
But it's possible that it was even 12.1. Yeah.
Yeah, and Oren just confirmed 12.1 indeed. Whew, that was a trick question, really, wasn't it? good thing I got my numbers right. Eric just asked a question. Can you recommend a good way to determine if using the in-memory DB option will be beneficial in a given environment? I give that over to you as well, given
I was just going to say,
past life.
let's put away my SQL developer. And so yes, you can of course use the in-memory option in any database environment that's running any type of analytics or reporting style queries. That's typically what it's aimed at. There are advisors available. So if you've got an environment but you're not sure what kind of benefit you'd get by using the database in memory, there is an advisor you can download from free from oracle.com. There's a white paper that accompanies that explains how to use it and how to read the results. Because what it's going to do is send back details about which tables it recommends should go into the in-memory column store and the benefit you would get from placing those tables in memory. So that's how the advisor works, but it would certainly be a good way to confirm your suspicion that in-memory may help in a particular environment. What it's going to do is basically go through your AWR repository, look at the queries that have executed on your system in the past, determine if they would benefit from the column store. So you could do the same thing yourself. You could look through the history of SQL statements in an environment and see whether or not you're doing a lot of full scans, or even if you're using the index scans, you could use our new index monitoring that we have in 12c that gives you a lot of details about how many rows are returned from each index access. So if you're even doing index accesses, but you're doing either full index scans, fast full scans, if you're doing or just returning all of the rows or the majority of the rows from that index, those types of query execution plans would all be good indicators that you'd benefit from in memory. But there's plenty of info on this, both on the in-memory blog, so blogs.oracle.com/in-memory, or on oracle.com, just look for the in-memory advisor, and you'll be able to download the tool and the white paper that tells you all this good stuff.
Great, thank you very much.
Cool. So can I get back to asking you?
Sure.
So one of the other questions that we had come in earlier on was, how should I go about resolving the error that appeared on my system? The error is, are you ready? I got to read this one, Gerald, so I'm looking down because I want to make sure I get it right. Vendor code 17002, unable to connect to DB from Mac.
Okay. That sounds like the very typical "we cannot connect to the other side" message that the client will throw. I think it's like network adapter could not establish connection, and then the follow-on error messages end up with this vendor code 17002, which maybe had some meaning once in a day, but I certainly don't know what 17002 means. But basically what the message means is like we cannot connect to the other side. So we cannot reach the host, we cannot reach the environment over there. There's a couple of different error messages that you will usually get that indicate whether you get to the host, whether you get to the listener, whether you get to the service. So for example, if you will be able to connect to the host on port 1521, or you go to any random port and there's no listener, you will actually get a TNS error, no listener back. That means you actually got to the server. But on the other side, on the port that we were trying to find a listener, no listener was present. And then if you get, usually the error is listener does currently not know of service name or request in the scripter. It's a very long cryptic sort of message. What that really just means is that the service name or database name you gave us is actually not served by the listener. So the listener doesn't know of that service name. And usually when you look on the other side and do listener control status, you will see all the service names that are in there, which usually means you mistyped the service name or database name. That's really what it should mean, unless somebody just created a new service for you, a new database for you, and didn't tell the listener yet. But usually it auto-registers automatically. But this particular one basically means we cannot even get to the other side. So network adapter couldn't establish connection. And of course, with those things, there can be many things that could be wrong. It could be a wrong host name. It could be that you're not connected to the web, to the network. It could be that your firewall is blocking you on your machine. Any numerous kind of things, and it's a very generic error. of course, right? Because we cannot connect. There's a little we can tell you why. There's many different reasons why you might be able to open a network connection to the other side. So at that point, you would actually have to look a bit further, you know, test whether you can reach the machine and so forth to get to that. I believe that we have had the similar question already since a while on AskTOM as well. So there's a written question submitted that gives you a few hints as well on where to look next. But you know, as said, it's like with that message, it's like first thing would be to make sure that you can actually see the server on the other side, sort of thing, and then go through the. Unfortunately, if not enough information or not more information, it's really difficult to give a precise answer of why you get that error.
No, but I think it's great to know that it basically I'm not able to communicate, and so start looking at all those standard things that are involved in trying to communicate with the database.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. You ready for the PL SQL built-in APIs? I actually didn't get a chance to read through it yet, so I'm not sure whether it's your or my question, but I'll read it anyway.
You read it, and I hope you know the answer. So
okay.
Let's see.
We love PL SQL for its built-in APIs. Great. Thank you very much. Though sometimes this API becomes, if not frustrating, then kind of confusing. There is a DBMS lob package, and there are actual load club from file, load club from load blob from file, and load from file is deprecated now from the one side, and club to file from the other. Two questions. Where is our blob-oriented alternative of writing to file function, and what happens if to the naming convention? Why wasn't it called save to club, save club to file? Yeah, it's an API-related question. I actually don't have the APIs for DBMS lob in my head, but let me just open it up for my sake. To see what we got there. There is indeed some confusion that we have with the APIs also when it comes to clubs and lobs, and you know that's mostly historical for the way they have been treated or are treated. Like blobs were more oriented for if any kind of binary data. It could be an image, could be an audio file, could be anything binary you would like to just keep it in the database as well. While clubs have always been more about I need to go beyond budget to 4K or 32K as we have now. And so the use cases were slightly different. As to the package, I know that we actually have some efforts going on right now to bring more synergy into club and blob. It's mostly being done because of the JSON support that we have also introduced that uses or can be stored in a blob or a club. And you know things that, for example, we came across is like you have a to_club function, which makes it very easy to take a string and convert it to a club, but you don't have a to_blob function, for example, right? And so it's like, well, and you know, as said before, it did not maybe matter so much because you know blobs were binary files, etc. So you would not just give it a string and say you want the blob, but now with the JSON support, but other things as well, you might very well just want to have synergy with that. And certainly, I actually have not seen the club2 file yet, so I believe Dennis that it has come with 12c. Basically, it writes the content of a file to a club into a B file. It's actually interesting. It should be overloaded, I suppose, with a blob, unless there's been a very good reason for. Again, I think I believe, or I guess that the reason for that was again for this differentiation between binary and club, where you know club is like write to a text file, while binary maybe the API specification was like, well, you know, if you write binary data, maybe you should do it in the application layer because you know what you write and how you write. In a sense, why I'm saying that, or in a sense, because when we write the blob, we basically just put bytes down on disk, right? So, and you don't necessarily worry about character encoding and so forth, which can, for example, hurt you if you write binary data or strings in binary data on disk, because it would just be written in the character setting that you have. A lot of people these days use UTF-8, which is very good. but still a lot of people, a lot of systems don't use UTF-8, but a national specific character set. And of course, the problem you then always end up with is when you read the data with a different character set, that doesn't make any sense anymore. And CLOB2 file, for example, has as well the character set that you can pass on to that. But yeah, we will look into that, why DBMS LOB has functionality for globs and not for blobs, and it certainly makes sense that DBMS LOB, given that it's not called DBMS glob, but DBMS blob, should probably have some synergy there. So thank you very much for raising this, Dennis, and I try to find out more and maybe can give you already an update in the next month's session.
Sounds good. Yes, I think we'll have to just track down those pesky LOB developers and make sure that they didn't just forget that one and see what they. But I'm guessing the reason you gave is in fact that it's being careful about writing the binary out to a file and making sure that the formats characters are a little easier to deal with all of that. So cool. All right, well, we can move on. And do you have any other questions, Gerald, that came in previously?
Sure, I have another question. Hang on. We actually, Maria and I did our homework, and we printed the questions out, or some of them anyway. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's right, actually. So you had a very interesting question that you got this week on disabling optimizer transformation I think on AskTOM. Somebody asked you about an underscore parameter. The query was transformed, which was not beneficial for the query, and the user asked you, well, should I not just turn it off altogether because my query ran slow? And in general, I think it's an interesting question. It's always an interesting question with regards to underscore parameters, but parameters in general. Should we just turn them on or off? Should we just leave them when we upgrade to what we have set in 8i times and so forth? So why don't you tell us a little bit of the question that you got this week and what it was all about and what do you think?
Okay, so the question I got was about one of the optimizer transformations that's called the join predicate pushdown is what the question was about. And the person had discovered that this transformation was occurring and they believed gave them a suboptimal execution plan. And so they Googled, as all good developers do, and they found an underscore parameter that disabled that transformation. And so they put in the underscore parameter and they got a better execution plan. And their question was, since this worked for this one SQL statement, I want to put the underscore parameter into production and disable this transformation for all queries. Is that the right approach? And in my personal opinion, but also my professional opinion, that is not the right approach. You really want to fix the problem at the scope of the problem. The scope of the problem the person was having was a single SQL statement. And so in situations like that, it's no bother to, chances are, by the way, the transformation was being chosen due to a cardinality misestimate, and that we thought we would have perhaps fewer rows or a lot more rows than we really did, and so pushing the predicate made sense. Because with all of these transformations, by the way, they are cost-based, and so that means the optimizer will transform your query, do the step, in this case, push the join predicates inside the view, and they'll cost that plan that we get. And the reason we even do it, by the way, is to open up additional access paths. By pushing the predicate, maybe we can use an index instead of having to, an index-based nested loops, instead of having to either do a sort merge join or a hash join or something when you're dealing with the view in the query. But when we do the push, we'll cost it, as I said, and then we'll actually cost it without doing the push, and we'll pick the plan with the lowest cost. So in this person's case, the plan with the predicate and the transformation kicking in, with the pushing of the predicate, I mean, that came out as the lowest cost. Now, if that's not correct, if that's not the best plan, chances are it's because there's a cardinality misestimate. So you could simply address this problem by fixing that cardinality misestimate, ideally with either new, more up-to-date statistics or additional statistics in the form of potentially a histogram or maybe extended stats. If none of those issues worked or you weren't able to do them at this time, The alternative then would be to fix the problem at the scope of the problem, which is a single SQL statement. You can do that by either using the hint, because all of these transformations have a hint to disable them as well, rather than the underscore parameter. So you could put the hint in. Now, if you're thinking, hang on a second, Maria, I can't change my application code. What are you talking about adding hints? Isn't that a major no-no? And you can do it without changing the application code. You can disable the transformation for an individual SQL statement either by using a SQL baseline. How to do that is available on the Optimizer blog. You can do it also by doing a SQL patch, and how to create your own SQL patch with a specific hint in it is also a post that we have on the Optimizer blog. So really, the long story short, what I'm trying to say is always try and address a problem you're having at the scope at which you're having the problem. So if every single SQL statement in the database was having an issue, every single one of them was doing a join predicate pushdown, and you wanted to disable all of that, that's when you do it at a parameter level. But really, when it's just one single SQL statement that's having an issue, it's much better to fix that problem at the scope of the problem, which is a single SQL statement rather than system-wide. Because now what you've done is you've disabled the transformation for this one problematic SQL. You've no idea how many other SQL statements it was actually kicking in for, and perhaps giving you a better plan that you have now regressed and given them a per or suboptimal execution plan. So I will get off my soapbox now. That's definitely a passion of mine, is trying to fix the problem you're encountering at the scope of the problem. So Gerald, we did get another question, and since folks are being very chatty today, maybe we might actually get some more details on this. So the last question we got this week on the pre-submit questions was about scheduling an ODI scenario. But there wasn't enough details in the question to understand exactly what they were after. If that person, because unfortunately it came in as anonymous, so if that person happens to have joined us this morning and wants to give us a little bit more details about the scheduling issue they were having with their ODI scenario, we can do our best to help. But while we wait to see if they are there, Gerald, could you just give us some advice in general on scheduling jobs in the Oracle database? Can I do it, and which way should I do it?
Yeah, so actually since a long time, the Oracle database does have a scheduler built in for reasons of like ETL loading or so forth. So you just have a piece of code, a piece of PL SQL or something that you would like to kick off at a specific time or reoccurring time. And rather than having to write your cron job and invoking the PL SQL or something, which you can do as well, you can do it via the database as well. And, you know, of course, why would you do cron job, which is this Linux scheduling tool, versus database scheduler? Both are schedulers, both use the exact same time, so it doesn't really make much of a difference. But for portability reasons, it might make some difference. So sometimes it's just very nice and convenient to have a scheduled job within the database. And it doesn't matter whether your customer or yourself are deploying this on Oracle database on Windows or on Linux or any other environment, where otherwise you would have to write specific scheduled jobs for those operating systems. So that's a nice little way of just whenever you have something that you would like to invoke recurringly to schedule with DBMS underscore scheduler. It actually is. It's a feature that's there in every edition as well. A lot of people sometimes look for something like that and actually don't know about it. So just go and check it out.
Cool.
Okay, and so we do have a question from John on the chat, and that is a DBus question. So we'll see whether we can answer that one or defer that to the Database Cloud, Ask Me Database Cloud Office Hour. So John asks, we're using primary standby configuration. It seems when we create the PDB on the primary, it's nicely created on the standby. However, if I create a new table space on the primary, Oracle Cloud mandates that the table space is encrypted, which requires TDE, transparent data encryption, to be configured. The question is, it seems I have to manually copy the TDE key files from the primary to the standby and restart the standby for it to work. Is this the correct way of handling this, or am I missing something obvious? In other words, is there not an automatic way for TDE settings to be automatically applied on the standby? Hope this makes sense. Well, so John, actually, I don't know on dbus how it's handled, and I certainly do not want to give you any wrong information here. So I would think that we could automatically propagate the key files, given that you can create the PDB just fine, and it goes to standby as well. But I don't know the definite answer. Maria, do you have an answer for this? Do you?
I don't, but I do know that we do offer these office hours for the availability folks. So, in other words, for the standby, Marcus and those guys do their own
Mm-hmm.
office hours. So, it would be worth taking a look at the schedule that you can find on asktom.oracle.com or in the dev gym. .oracle.com. You can go to either place. You'll see the schedule there, and it would definitely be worth asking that question for that office hours. Maybe you can pre-submit it, and that way you can get an answer. Because as Gerald said, it seems unusual that we wouldn't somehow propagate the keys, but I'm not a TD nor standby expert, so I don't know the answer for sure.
And actually, on the census, might also be worth to ask the question on the database cloud office hour, as it is a dbus question specifically. So we have an office hour for that as well, database cloud. They might be able to help you there as well. Okay, Dennis is going through PL SQL APIs.
I was going to say, you must be just reading the book. Are you, Dennis, just looking through the book?
So actually we have a couple of, it's very good, right? Because people I know that are actually, it's their evenings and they are engaged, and we're very appreciative of that. So Oren actually just pointed out the club2 file was part of DBMS XSL processor since 10G, and it moved to DBMS lob in 12.2. So perhaps that's just the answer there, that it was actually not a new function, but maybe the DBMS XSL processor has been deprecated. I actually don't know. Let's quickly look. Or they just decided that actually the function makes more sense in DBMS lob rather than in their package, which also sometimes happens. That people say, well, actually, you know, this is a lob function, not really an XML related function. So let's move it over to the other package. Just quickly have a look at the DBMS XSL processor package. No, that's still fine. Not deprecated yet, so all good. So it seems that they basically just, yeah, exactly. It says in the documentation, this procedure writes content to a lob. This procedure has moved to the DBMS lob package starting with database C 12C release 2. So it has just moved over there, and we will get back to the developers and ask for the reasons behind that.
But I'm sure it is what you said, Gerald, that it just makes more sense to be in the lob package.
Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah.
So another PL SQL question from Dennis. I'll let you read it for once. I feel like I'm.
Hold on, because the way my screen is set up, it's.
No, leave it. I'll read it. I have it. Don't worry. Another question on PL SQL. There's also the UTL file package. Connor McDonald has recently wrote a blog post on it, on its death, convicting if talk about the particular use case for flat files. Convincing, if talk about that particular use case for flat files. But there are other use cases when this package is useful, i.e. for managing binary files resided outside the database. This is extremely useful for the XE users and all those of us who don't want huge backups and long backup creation time. The question is actually from the comments to the post. Is it possible to add APIs to retrieve directory contents in addition to already available API there? So I have actually not read Connor's post on UTL file, but I think it's basically just can we enhance UTL file that we can read contents from a directory rather than just the file? If I got this right, Dennis. Yeah, we can certainly have a look into that. I mean, there again, you come into API API specification questions, right? So should a package UTL file deal just with a file, or should it deal also with directories, or should there be a UTL directory that basically is a function that gives you a list of files that you can pass on into UTL file and so forth. We will take that as well to the developers, see what they think. I hope that okay, sorry, I'm just reading what Dennis is
Yeah, I see.
is commenting on it. There is still no UTL directory. So we have a look there. And yes, you're absolutely right, Dennis. Don't worry, you can ask PL SQL questions as much as you like. That's also not a problem at all. I just want to say, though, the question you make about huge backups and long backup creating time and XE users and stuff like that. So yes, of course, if you have a lot of data in your database, you might get huge backups, but since a long time, Oracle can actually do incremental backups. And that means that once you will have to take a full backup of your database, level 0 backup as we call it, that's true, and that will take a while because it will back up everything. But from then on, you can actually take incremental backups, and that will only back up the data that you have actually modified. So that's a very well-known best practice out, or very well used best practice out there with a lot of our customers, that they don't take backups every evening or something like that, but actually they do incremental backups for a week perhaps, and then you take another full backup or something like that. So that also helps a bit avoiding huge backups. But yes, you will still have to take one full backup as well.
Yeah, and you can also parallelize that initial full backup as well. You can have multiple threads active in that too. It may not reduce the size, but it would certainly reduce the length of time that it takes to take the backup.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, we'll check about the UTL directory. Maybe that makes a lot of sense to have that as well. There's certainly also some development going on in this space with regards to object storage. That's basically because of cloud-driven efforts, you have your data sitting on object storage, for example, or some raw data that you would like to get into your database. So there have been some efforts going on onto that you, for example, see in the data warehouse, autonomous data warehouse cloud service, which I believe is a DBMS_cloud package that you can use. And we just have Venzl, I hope I pronounced the name correctly, also put in a blog post with another method to get files listing using external tables.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the things, depending on what you wanted from the directory, if it is just simply the files, you can do it with external tables. And so thanks for the reminder for that.
Perfect. Let's see whether it's a workaround, but not clean. Nice way to do so. Fair enough. I'll take that point. So I think from the chat so far we have everything, nothing that we have missed over the last couple of, oh no, sorry, there is one. How to load file containing multi-line column using Oracle external tables. And that question came from the iPhone. And just reposted. So depending on, well, with the multi-line column, so depending on the structure you have, you can basically tell external tables your record delimiter, your field delimiter, and also how the fields are, for example, escaped as in quotes and something like that.
Right.
So for very often people just say there's keywords for new line to use, so you just say records limited by new line, which would be just a regular carriage return on the file, and that will actually break those multi-line records. But if you have a clear identifier that you know when the record is finished and you know when the new record starts, you can always just put that identifier, for example, in records delimited by quotes and then this identifier, and this could be any character as well, so not only printable characters, but you can actually just also pass on hex codes if you like for the characters. So if you have something like invisible characters or something like that you would like to use as well. So that would be one way. Of course, another way would be to use the preprocessor functionality that external tables have as well to get rid of those multi-line columns. That is sometimes very useful if it's a bit more complicated, the way how the fields or the records are delimited, and maybe more complicated that you want to express in an external table DDL definition, or perhaps even that you can, then you can always have a little program, whether it's your shell script or anything, that basically just puts it into a nice format for a user to be able to read on the external table. And the preprocessor is also something that you just define on the external table. Basically, is some script that or some binary that gets invoked that prints the result into the standard output. That's where it picks it up, and then actually does the parsing on top of that. So you can have a look at that as well. But my guess is have a look at the definitions, have a look at what we supported with the delimited record delimited by and field delimited by, and see whether you can get already around this with the definition.
Yeah.
And if not, then you can use the preprocessor. And just the follow-up here is I used triple hash, but I'm getting trim white space error. I'm not quite sure what the trim white space error refers to, so perhaps another way we can look at this is if you would like to post a question on AskTOM afterwards. That's your records, that's what you try to do, that's the trim white space error that you get, and then we can actually follow up over offline methods to get you working on this external table.
Perfect.
Okay, then John has a memory question. We are very excited to start using in-memory for a large project. 2 thumbs up there from us.
Yes, well done, John.
Very good. Before we get too carried away with it, are there other guidelines or cases you would recommend not using it? I think there are some cases where we recommend not using it.
Sure. So you're right. In-memory should be incredibly useful in a whole host of different environments. But there are some guidelines where it just wouldn't be useful at all. So if I have a pure transaction processing application, one that is simply ingesting a lot of data, doing small single record lookups through primary keys, those type of workloads are not going to be beneficial within memory. In-memory really is great at speeding up any type of analytic or reporting style queries. So queries that need to access large volumes of data, and they may return a small amount of data, but they are searching through a large amount, and they don't have a quick access, things like a primary key lookup or something like that. Then in-memory would definitely be a good use case. But if it's a simple primary key lookup, or it's doing a lot of heavy DML and no reporting, then they wouldn't be good use cases to use the in-memory column store. But if you've got a combination workload where you are doing some of that, but you're also doing quite a bit of reporting, then in-memory would be great for that. Obviously, a data warehouse, data mart, any kind of object store, they'd all be great use cases for database in memory because, of course, they'd be doing a lot of reporting and analytic style queries. So, John, hopefully that helps. I can talk about this ad nauseum, but I appreciate that not everybody is as into in-memory as I am. So if there's any specific follow-up questions, just throw them in the chat. Otherwise, we did also write a blog post about that. So you can find more information about where database in memory will help on a query-by-query basis. So we give some examples that say this query will benefit and then that one won't. So you can also check that out at blogs.oracle.com/in-memory.
Perfect. And for those folks of you who don't know it, Maria used to be the in-memory PM before she got elevated into, how do I say this correctly, in higher grounds of covering everything database. So she can talk at length about the optimizer, which she used to be the PM before in-memory, or in-memory, or the Oracle database now as well. And I just noticed that you don't have your in-memory sticker on the wall anymore. They're back there at the autonomous and nice.
Oh, it's on the front of the office that you can't see, but I need to, you're right, I need to put one there on the back so that it's, when we're chatting, you can see all the stickers. Yeah.
Exactly, all the questions we can ask you, even spaceships. Then he's got another question on SQLnet, and we're coming up on the top of the hour. So for anybody who has questions, post them on the chat. We try to go through them as quickly as possible before we reach the top of the hour. So I have a SQLnet question on SQLnet. I have an instance of 11GXE on Windows Server 2012. And when there's NTS authentication method in my SQLnet Aura file, every time I try to connect using SQL Plus as sysdba, I get the insufficient privileges exception. I believe that's because my OS or domain user doesn't have some group membership or something, but I couldn't get what exactly. When I connect using SQL Plus / /nolog, connect to sysdba, and then type my password, everything is okay. So any idea what it could be with NTS authentication? Yeah, so there's a couple of things there that the authentication is different. Ideas indeed. Sorry, Dennis just corrected the word there. There's a couple of different things here. So if you do a /s sysdba, you are actually connecting via the BEQ protocol, which is called BQ. I can never really pronounce that English word, but basically what happens is you actually connect directly to PMON, and PMON authenticates you, and you're in, so to speak. So it's the most direct way how you can connect to an Oracle database. And yes, for that you do have to be at least in the DBA group on Linux, and the similar group to Windows. So basically that group that the Oracle binaries are installed or that the processes are actually running. If you're not, then you cannot attach to the process. The similar group, I suppose, on Windows, because I'm not a Windows user, it will be the group that the Oracle database is running at, or that the binaries are installed. So have a look whether, check that you make sure that whatever the binaries, the Oracle home of XE is there, all the groups or that group that it has, that your user has that as well. That would be the first thing. So when you do a sysdba, or use password, then you actually go via the regular authentication process, and that's not via the BEQ protocol to PMON, but the regular one that you go over SQLnet and so forth. And I have a feeling that when you have insufficient privileges on SQL+/sysdba, it's usually to do with the group. Be aware, for this is an 11g question, so this doesn't really matter for you, Dennis, for just right now, but be aware that with 12.1 also came the threaded execution model, where you basically don't run background processes or a process for each what we call background processes, but we actually run only about 4 or 5 processes, and we run our background tasks, our background processes within threads. So when you, again, I'm a Linux guy, I'm sorry for that, but when you look at Linux, you would see when you start an Oracle database 12c, you would see a bunch of processes, background processes, Aura underscore, and they all do different things, like the in-memory background processes that load data in there. You would see a system monitor, SMON, a PMON, and so forth. If you use threaded execution, then actually you will only see 4 or 5. You will see, I believe, Aura underscore VKTM, virtual timekeeper, or whatever, and you will see a bunch of Aura underscore U00. And that as well does not allow you to actually do a /sysdba, and the reason for that is because there is no PMON process. The PMON process actually now is a thread within a process, and this direct by the process authentication doesn't work either. And you're just saying that on Linux everything is okay, yes, and more transparent. I would also say, Dennis, please post the question on the AskTOM forum, because obviously it can depend on a couple of things that we have to check a couple of things, make sure that we see what's going on. Actually, because you can perhaps post it on the AskTOM forum, perhaps there's also an XE forum, but post it somewhere and let us know in some shape or form, and we will try to give this to our Windows guys that can hopefully help you further on what's going on there and why you cannot get in there with /sysdba. Last note on that, you should not really use /sysdba in any case, because it's the most direct way to connect to your database. That also means that's the most or least secure way to connect to your database. And also if you use multi-tenant, for example, again, which came with 12c, which you will have in 18c XE as well, the /sysdba will connect you actually to the CDB and not to your PDB. So in order to connect with your sys into the PDB, you would then have to use an alter session sec container, or ideally what you really should do is a sys password at localhost and so forth to your PDB service name.
All right. I think we've pretty much run the clock down, Gerald. So for another month, it's time for us to wrap it up, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for the audience on the line and for all the questions. It's obviously really good for us also to have it as interactive as possible than just reading some pre-filed questions. I think we got everything that got pre-filed as well. If not, the next month we will be back as well in the middle of holiday season or vacation season. But everybody, thanks very much, also especially for those guys of you where it's in the middle of the night or evening. Thanks for being on. Thanks again, and bye to around the world, and see you in a month's time.
Thanks, guys. Goodbye.
Bye.